Today, we are finally going over the entirety of my settings for Warzone. This is something I've been getting a lot of questions on, especially as I've now switched over to the controller, and many people want to know my settings here. I'm going to start by giving you my mouse overview as well, so in case you are still using that, as well as want to know what I'm tweaking going into Black Ops 6 a little bit and how I'm going to be running that. I'll have that as well as my full settings for in-game. Keep in mind, I have a 4090 high-end CPU as well. Full setup for my specs are over on my Discord channel. So I definitely am pushing a lot of frames, but I still bring some of my settings down and try to maximize my frame rate playing at 1440p. So let's get into this. I'm going to just go over all of the settings at a high level so you guys can at least see them. I will include them all on screen here as I scroll through it, as I'll probably use this too, and if I ever need to update my setup. I am playing 800 DPI on the mouse, so you know. 4.20 is my sense. It's pretty middle ground, but the main thing I'm looking for is a steady 360 radius across my mouse pad, which mine is absolutely enormous. I up my sensitivity to keep up with this game quite a bit. I also used to have a specific tuning for all of my aim down sights. However, I've just made this the relative at 1.0 multiplier, so it is just consistent across all of them. It's about a 75% reduction for a red dot and a little bit more for the rest of them. So it's pretty good. It'll basically make it the higher the optic, the lower the sensitivity, so you can kind of aim. Custom settings, vertical aim access. Most of this is pretty default, though. I didn't change anything with like the calibration or anything like that. I tried to just go to as most default settings as I possibly could. Now, keybinds, of course, are very different depending on the user. I really like auto run forward for the tilde since it's just out of the way. Something I have been trying to adjust to, though, is because I hit Z right now for the sake of prone, that means I can't be holding A or S at the same time. So what I'm working on is changing to left control for my prone and dive ability. So when it comes to omnidirectional movement, I'll be able to quickly just fly across the screen. And if I'm also hitting shift, I can then just smash my pinky down to hit control and go for a sprint dive as needed. I'm still working on some of the binds for that, but I think I'm going to need to do that to maintain the pressure there. Interact, I've set mine to E. A lot of people use F. Either way, doesn't really matter. I also do recommend you set next weapon and previous weapon to 1 and 2. You can't really set the specific one you want to, but those are the two that I use. Weapon mounting, I switched that to caps lock. Weapon inspect is N. I just like to be able to hit that with my thumb when I'm running around. I'm melee with F. V is probably the better bind, but I struggled finding that in panic situations. So F is a lot easier for me being right next to D. I can just pull that off more consistently. Now, for the lethal equipment, I have that bound to the mouse so I can aim and throw at the same time. I don't think that necessarily needs to be the case, but I can also strafe in full control with WASD, so I do prefer that. I've seen some people also use middle mouse click for this as a replacement. Plate up, I'm just used to the old game, so I use 4 for my heal there, which then I changed some of these binds all for. As you can see, previous weapon is set to 1 here. So I can switch between the two or do any YYs or reload cancels by hitting those numbers. Advanced combat is those. So then we go down to vehicle advanced. Couple changes here for like drifting, auto move forwards, the same tilde key. I'm just used to that. Couple of the other binds here. I don't really use many of the other vehicles though, so this isn't too important. Scoreboard. I like to have H for the quick scoreboard for in-game, so I have that. Still keep M for map. I just stretch my thumb. I don't feel like I need to do that in pressure situations too much. Big change here, though, is I've been using middle mouse for ping for a very long time. After seeing some recent gameplay, I'm still figuring out what key this guy uses, but he's pinging absolutely everything. And the pings on this game continue on after you tag them. You'll see the same thing on the controller settings if you stick around for that side, too. But I've changed this to now my forward mouse thumb button here. The main thing that I used to use that for was my toggling Discord mute. I've moved that to my foot pedal, so now my comm stuff, changing, mutes and whatever, will all be done via my foot pedal. Same thing with push to talk in game. This frees up a very important bind, and now, theoretically at least, I'll be able to shoot with my click, left click, ping with my thumb, and aim, and move. I can do everything all at once. So I'm working on changing all my ping binds to forward mouse so I can get better comms for the team, as well as even for myself, if I'm in solos, pinging somebody before they run behind a wall so I can basically have free combat scout. Big advantage there. Push to talk is set to T here as well. I'm just used to hitting that, but I mostly use my foot pedal for that. That's bound to the same key. A couple of my other buttons, looks like these are all pretty much default there. And as for gameplay, I still use hold shift to sprint. I find it pretty easy to use with my pinky on this. However, you are going to be at a movement speed disadvantage to the controller guys who are always maximum speed tack sprinting. I do have the tactical sprint behavior to single tap run, so if as soon as I tap shift, I don't need to double tap it in order to get the tack sprint going. It'll automatically tack sprint me. This does put you at a slight disadvantage if you're pushing buildings because the tack sprint time to ADS is a little bit longer. However, I think the overall movement is more important in this game, so that's why I run that setting. Walk behavior, nothing else too fancy here. Make sure apply all plates is on. The C4 is pretty much completely broken in this game. I don't really use it that much. I think it's all pretty useless. So, going over to the controller settings now. Walk you through this. This has been a big shift that I've done probably about 2 to 3 weeks on now, although I've only done probably 10 days streaming it. A lot of it's been practicing off stream. For the most part, keep in mind I am using a normal default settings for this, mainly because this controller has back paddles on it. So I have all 4 back paddles, and I use them all. That means I don't necessarily need to use a claw grip, which I'll also just show you here. You can claw over. What a lot of people do is they'll keep their finger here, right, to hit the claw so they can hit all of these buttons. The main thing that I use that for is I'll claw the left hand up to hit the map with this button. I'll also occasionally use the D-pad with this. However, I find it to be very inconvenient, so I mostly have just been leaning my thumb over to hit down on D-pad, and then right on that, I can kind of hit those while I'm running forward still, so I can keep movement, right, and then just stretch the thumb over to hit those buttons. Probably would be better to just fully claw it. I'm still working on some of the skill there, and obviously, I can only move to the right. Moving to the left, going through the menus, not as good. But this is something I've been working on, and that's been the best so far. Obviously, the combat, I think, is a bit more important in general. So, getting back into this, I don't have bumper ping or anything on. I'll get to some of that in a second. Actually, you know what? Let's just go through the binds in general. I'll pull up my IQ here so you guys can see exactly what all my binds are on screen. The main thing that I have is this bumper here. So there's actually this extra white bumper button, and I use that to ping players. So in the same aspect of what I was talking about on mouse, if you saw that portion, while I am shooting, I can just push my finger in and hit the ping here. I've gotten pretty good at it most of the time. I just forget to do it. It's not that it's hard. It's just I'm not always doing that, but it's really good, especially for range. It's a little more difficult to remember to do that while diving, while doing everything else, if I'm in a close range fight. But for range, it's been really good, and I'm trying to ping as much stuff as I can to basically just get free combat scout. If you hit somebody, you get that ping on them. You don't even need to hit them, but you can also, while you're hitting them, ping them. So if they run behind a wall, you can keep tracking them for a couple seconds if they try to re-challenge you or anything. Super good there. The other side here, I have this bind specifically set to dive. So this I just set as like the tilde key on my keyboard. This is one of the benefits of this like controller system, specifically on mouse and key on computer, is you can bind keyboard keys to the controller as well. Not all controllers do this, but I bound that to a specific dive key in my keybinds for my mouse. That is this thing, so that I can always just, if I want to just do a quick guaranteed dive, I can hit that. I think the hybrid setting, which I'll show you a second, is pretty good as well. Normal stick layout, dead zone inputs. I tried to just set these as minimally as I could. I felt a little bit of drift, so I just put mine up to 4. You might be able to go lower. Some people suggested that you bring the left stick drift down, more so actually the right stick drift. This is so that you don't have to move the stick as far to get the maximum speed. You'll just start turning faster. I don't think that's actually worth it. I would rather have more total control through the whole process than getting it up to speed. Like, it's not that much of a difference. And I want to be able to have the minute control, whether I'm walking on somebody or whether I am trying to hit a sniper shot from range. Just what I've found so far. Sensitivity, I started as like 6.5. I've converted it to 6.6. That way, it's just consistent. I ended up liking this better, and I initially started on a 1 aim down sight sensitivity, brought this down to 0.75. Almost everybody seems to be at 0.8 to 0.9, at least has some on this, but I cranked it up a little bit higher because I found after playing it on 1 for a long time, week or so, I got used to that, and then when I turned it down, everything just started hitting way better. Like, I noticed a difference on it, and, try it out both ways if you want to. But it felt like I had more aim assist doing this. And I think that was just because it was a lower sense, so I could get more of the minute controls, especially for Warzone where I'm shooting people at range. I like this. I may turn it up if it's just in multiplayer, but for now, that's been pretty good. Everything else has just been on 1, though. I haven't really messed with tac stance too much. Aim assist, of course, on. I tried out Black Ops versus default. I couldn't really tell much of a difference. The main thing that I could tell was that it felt like the aim assist kicked in sooner on Black Ops, like a wider box around them. But the total aim assist felt just as good on default. And going through a bunch of different pro settings, a lot of them did use default. So, it should be fine. And so I'm just leaving it on that so I get used to whatever. Motion blur off. Yep. And that sounds good. Now, this is the big thing. Automatic tac sprint saves you from constantly having to click in on the left stick. Definitely worth it. Keeps your overall speed. Gets your slides more consistent. Everything across the board. Slide to maintain sprint is good to keep on too. From everything that I've seen, just keeps you sprinting. You don't have to keep clicking any buttons. Single tap sprint. This gets you instantly into that tac stance sprint. Definitely want that. This has been a more heated debate one. Grounded mantle. I tried this off for quite a while, and I think my total clunkiness in the game has led me to turn it on because I couldn't always jump through the windows. It will cause accidental volts onto different items. I had better control of this over on mouse and like just being able to spam spacebar, so I kept that off on mouse. But on controller, I find, and I might even turn it back on over there, but on controller, being able to just quickly volt like 3 things just in one hit, click, 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 rather than 6 clicks, like jump and grab on and jump and grab on, makes it so much faster to just make crazy fast plays on people. That's where I'm leaning towards right now. Or if I'm running away, I can kite better. I like having this on. It has led to sometimes I got to be careful if you're going through a doorway. If you jump when you're going through a doorway, you could accidentally mantle onto the roof above it, which is a little awkward. Or if you're near a box, it might volt you up onto the box, pulling you in an animation, but you can still shoot through the animations, at least halfway through it. You can shoot way earlier than you anticipate, so it's still pretty good, and then that also makes you a bit of a dodge. So anyways, I've decided to keep this on. We'll see how it continues to go. This is the setting I was talking about earlier, is the hybrid setting for diving. So if you don't have any other buttons that you could specifically bind your own controller, if you're clicked in on the left stick for like sprinting, obviously we don't even have that bound to anything because it doesn't do anything here. If you click in on the left stick and then slide, it will actually dive you instead. So it's the ability to always have the slide action. If you hit B or go for a slide, it's never going to dive you by accident unless you are holding down the left stick and then click it. That will trigger the dive. So it makes it so you have the option to do what you're intending to do, because the last thing you want is to try to slide and you accidentally dive and now you're locked into an animation. Everything else here, door bashing, parachute off, aim down sight behavior. This is a good one to have. Prioritize interact. Some people in my chat were telling me to do or just tap to interact or tap to reload. Tap to interact was the main one people were saying. Prioritize interact, though, will allow you to do both. This is what I've seen most of the pros have on. There is another setting. I mentioned this earlier, though. If you can specifically bind, this is what I was talking about earlier, just for clarity. I can bind this reload button to R, and that will let me then guaranteed always reload with this back button, and then I could just use this X button as the appropriate pickup item. I can even have that be tap to pick up. So I have separate binds for them, so I never accidentally do one or the other. I haven't really needed that yet. I may do that for the future. We'll see. Armor plate behavior, apply all, super important. I think that's a default setting. When the game first came out, it wasn't. So a lot of people mention that. And there is the rest of those settings for you. Now, in terms of graphic settings, again, I have a crazy spec'd out PC. On and boost for lowest latency is good. VSync is off. Frame rate unlimited. That's the biggest thing I'm prioritizing is frame rate. Quality, I play 1440p. I've tried a couple of these different settings. This seems to be the go-to one most people use. I used image scaling for a long time. DLSS is a super popular one as well. But this seems to get the job done. It doesn't cause any frame rate issues. Makes everything at least relatively sharp. Ray tracing and things I'm not really worried about. These are some settings that I've seen from a lot of people as well. So I have a bit of the texture resolution. Most things are off, though. Depth of field, particle quality. Again, there's probably some other great videos out there that you can reference as well, but a lot of people have been interested in what I'm running in particular. Maybe you like the way my game looks or runs, so it is here. I switched to 120 FOV in this game as well, mainly because I needed to keep up with all the close range. I find it to be worth it versus being able to see further in this one in particular. I used to run 109.69 in Warzone 1. And then just bring all the camera shake down, blur. Anything that's going to affect your view, you know, turn that off. Sometimes I've run PC speakers and home theater. I kind of gone between the two. I don't necessarily think it matters that much. It's more just for the audio, you know, left and right channel to find people is the biggest thing. I also have compression on my hardware for my Rode device, which I'll show you, I guess, at the end of this as well. But I have also heard people say keep the effects at 100% and then just decrease the master volume to tune your audio so you still get all of the main audio from that. So take that for what you will. These are, for the most part, all just default, though. Juggernaut music, passenger war tracks, too. Probably don't want those on. I think I have the base audio for that set to 0 with war tracks, so it doesn't really matter for me. Interface, these are just subtitles. There's one thing that is worth doing in accounts probably here in a second. One other thing with HUD bounds. I would recommend bringing this as in as you possibly can. So when you're looking in the middle of the screen, you have less distance for your eye to travel to get to the TAC map. It'll be in your peripheral vision, especially if you're sitting really close to your monitor. I'm, not too far away. Probably one full arm's length out is how far it is away from my head. Color customization. I didn't tweak this too much, but I do have this filter on. Somebody suggested it when the game first came out. Hit markers. There's the rest of that. Account settings. So challenges, I turned this off just to hear less of the guitar riffs popping off when I'm trying to fight. I don't really necessarily need it, so just turned it off to min-max that a bit as well. Now, my audio software that I use or hardware rather, is the Rode. Okay, so in this audio line is my main one for the game sound that I have. I use a high-pass filter that takes a little bit of the boom off the bottom. So when there's like a really big sniper, that bass is kind of cut out a little bit, so it's not as boomy for me. I also have a compressor. So at the high end of the audio, instead of it going up forever, anything that's really loud, like gunshots blaring super loud, I taper off the top of it. So it brings all of the top end sounds down by 2.5 to 1, compressing all of that high end. That lets me turn the overall audio up with the gain. So all of my audio goes up higher, allowing me to hear some of those subtle sounds a little better while not blowing out my eardrums at the high end because all those high, super loud sounds have been brought down a bit. There's some good settings that you can use for loudness equalization on PC as well. I don't like that because it makes the whole game sound terrible. This was basically me trying to recreate an audio curve that I saw from another video from Art is War, which you probably have heard of like all the intense, insane audio, but bringing up some of the lower sounds and some of the higher sounds and kind of the ranges of, I guess, where the footsteps would be. It seemed pretty good. It's a very minor difference in general, but that is the other EQ. So that's the processing that I do for anything. The most valuable thing I think is really just the compressor. There's a couple other things you can do. I don't need a noise gate or anything. A lot of these are more for voice. But yeah, that is the other end of my settings there. So I think that covers pretty much everything. Hopefully a good overview. for you guys. If there's anything that stood out the most, feel free to comment down below, timestamp it for anybody. I'm going to put this over in my Discord if you're watching this on YouTube or anywhere else. I do have all of my settings and information in the server. If you guys are interested, it's down at the bottom under my setup. So if you want to see any of the current things that I am testing, you can see I've got the new headset. I'm going to replace that now that I am consistently using this at this point. But you can see all the different spec things I'm using there. And I'm going to put the settings video down here under settings. If you don't see these two, you might have to turn it on the channels and roles, turn on following all the channels, or just untick what you're looking for. And if you're ever looking for people to play with, there's always people in here looking for Warzone games. It's pretty awesome. Just click on the Warzone lobby. People are always looking and having a good time there, as well as everything else we got going on in it. Thanks so much for watching, though. And I'll see you guys out in the streams and out in the new games. Later.